As 2025 comes to a close, I decided to reflect on my favourite films out of the many I watched this year. These won't be new films. That video will come out when I've managed to catch a few more before making up my mind. No, this list will be exclusively the older films, meaning from last year or before. This isn't exactly a definitive list of the best, and there's no particular ordering, but that title is more likely to get a couple more views. Treat this like a video chock full of recommendations, for if you want to watch something but don't know what. So, without further ado, let's begin. 2025 was the year that the Western genre finally really clicked with me. Not saying I didn't like Westerns beforehand, but 2025 was when I started really liking the genre. And that boils down to First Cow, which would have been on this list if there weren't 19 other picks which I prioritised, and High Plains Drifter. This film is Clint Eastwood's gothic horror Western masterpiece, a morality tale where there is no firm good guy, but only the monsters within man. Maybe, depending on how you watch it, even a supernatural force. I love Eastwood as a director, with his emphasis on morally grey stories, and justice, and High Plains Drifter is the most morally murky of his films. As I mentioned prior, there is no character you really root for. It's all horrible, detestable characters in a conflict which doesn't result in some triumphant kick-ass gunfight. It's also incredibly shot, and the third act, especially the way it uses fire and its lighting, is gorgeous to look at. It goes a long way in applying texture to the grime of the American West. This is one that I definitely will make a video essay on. I have the script in development as I speak. Jurgen Kerr's directorial debut is one that I'd stumbled across when looking on Letterboxd for something a little out of the box to watch. Won't be the last time I say that. And it is my kind of film, more so than the other Jurgen Kerr film I've seen, A Touch of Sin. It may be apparent when looking at my show as a whole, and the films I naturally seem to gravitate towards, but I have an affinity for films featuring characters who are a little zannen, disappointing. I mesh with Bob Ferguson from one battle after another. I really like Josh O'Connor as JB Mooney in The Mastermind, and Pickpocket is a major pillar within my little curated zannen film canon. It's about a small town pickpocket who's a bit bitter because all of his friends have moved on to better livelihoods. That's the epitome of what I'm talking about when I say zannen. It's shot with this documentarian vibe, which is still allowed to be more stylized with a broader colour palette, which portrays the smaller Chinese towns of the era in this romantic view, which provides even more contrast with the central character, played by Wang Hongwei. It's another small-scale indie foreign film, which I suggest you watch. Do you like animated films which have a unique style? Do you want to watch independent films you might not have otherwise heard of? Then watch Cleaners. It's a scrapbook collage-looking anthology film about the members of a high school cleaners group in the Philippines. And I don't use scrapbook collage lightly. The film was literally made by shooting on film, removing 8 frames per second, having those frames printed in monochrome, coloured in, by hand, with highlighters, and then reformed into the film that was released. The effort really shows in the final film. It has a tangible quality and a scrappiness which was translated from the high school setting. The way the highlighted colours practically pop off the screen, dichotomous to the monochrome of the rest of the frames, is utterly outstanding and aesthetically pleasing to the eye. The stories might not necessarily stick the landing each and every time. I found one to be quite weird in how it progressed, but the quality of animation was enough for me to sidestep that brief narrative blunder. Cleaners is a real indie gem. Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger created some of the most beautiful Technicolor films to ever grace a silver screen. My exposure to them may be limited. The Thief of Baghdad and The Red Shoes are pure ecstatic cinema, but I think that A Matter of Life and Death holds up as one of their best works, just below The Red Shoes if I were to rank them. The contrast between the achingly romantic use of colour, in contrast with the coldness of the afterlife, evoked by the dichotomy in film, is powerful at demonstrating the beauty of life which the film celebrates. To be clear, I only became aware of the film once I'd watched Wes Anderson's The Phoenician Scheme, which does the same thing with its shift from colour cinematography to monochrome, and I'd heard of it as an inspiration for that film. The comparisons are clear as day, with both featuring the aforementioned colouring decision, plane crashes, and an affinity for the angelic in the afterlife scenes. But A Matter of Life and Death, I think, is the superior film. It has a mushy and sentimental look at existence in a kind of twee, British cinema way.
You realize that by this attitude you've forfeited any chance of winning your case?
All right, but you won't get June as well.
Your Honor, members of the jury, I'm afraid he really does love her.
Which can be overlooked by how the film was produced immediately following the end of the Second World War, and how that is a part of the story being told, which makes it unmissable. I'll say this now, I finally got round to the full Paul Thomas Anderson filmography this year. I've seen a few before then, but there were so many left for me to get around to. Suffice to say, this may be the first PTA film on the list, but it's certainly not the last. Boogie Nights is everything I was told it was, with tonal shifts veering from a laugh-right comedy
gonna shoot you in the state you're in.
What do you mean state? State of California? I know where the fuck I am, Jack.
Into heartstring-tugging emotional drama, into some of the most tense filmmaking from a non-horror or non-thriller drama. The scenes at the donut shop and Ray Hart Jackson's place really got me. It's one of the most vanilla film opinions out there, but PTA is really something. There's a smorgasbord of characters, each with their own distinct and unique personalities, goals, speech patterns who all come alive due to PTA's brilliantly energetic writing of dialogue, and an ensemble cast which is still somehow the second best within his filmography. Can you guess what number 1 is? Boogie Nights goes by like a flash. It's evident that it's made by a younger filmmaker, flexing their abilities behind their craft, and that is exactly what I love about it. Call me a juvenile cinephile if you want. I hope that at least some of the other entries on this list are a bit left field if you think so. But I like it when films have a dynamic style, which they simply breathe in, absorbing the audience into the world that the characters reside in. No one really talks about Little Fish, and I think it comes down to when it was released. It premiered in 2020, the worst year in the history of movies, but it needs to be rediscovered. It's about a couple's difficulties with the memory loss virus as a pandemic spreads rapidly across the globe. It is a heartbreaking film as the two leads, played by Olivia Cooke and Jack O'Connell, have to watch and can't do anything against the worsening virus, seeing as it slowly erases their relationship, making them forget each other over time. The performances from Cooke and O'Connell as they start to lose touch, with the two desperately trying to look past their vanishing memories for as long as they can, are heartbreaking and come across as really intimate and real. There is no semblance of sensationalism as the characters in the film suffer from the dementia-like virus which plagues their lives. It's been quite a while since I watched Little Fish, but the emotional volley of gut punches is still with me. I can't forget it. It isn't a flashily directed film. Chad Hartigan proves that, as a director, he can take a step back and let the story tell itself. In a way, with the two core performances anchoring the film, and the rest of the crafts are there to build them up, with no risk of being jarringly apparent. The key to why Little Fish works is its naturalism. It's how the pandemic feels that much more visceral. Little Fish is an utterly devastating look at the inevitable tragedy. It's definitely one of the most underlooked films of the decade so far. Zombie stories are my shit. When done well, zombie stories can be incredible. Hell, one of my favourite books of all time is Zone 1 by Colson Whitehead, the original writer of Nickel Boys. There aren't a lot of films within the horror subgenre which I have seen that I would call great. One could count them all on one hand. And the creme de la creme, the cream of the crop, is Yeon Sang-ho's 2016 horror action film, Train to Busan. On a surface level, it has some of the most dastardly entertaining zombie action set pieces within the confines of the train, balancing both high-octane action and thrilling tension, but that alone doesn't make it the truly special film it is. Train to Busan will hit you in the feels like a train, really. You truly learn to care for all the main characters on the train, and the plight they're in as the film carefully takes the time to create well-rounded three-dimensional characters, like Gong Yoo Sok-woo, Don Lee as Sang-hwa, Kim Soo-an as Soo-an, and Choi Woo-shik as Yong-guk, which make the scenes that much more tense. That won't prepare you for the final scenes if you haven't seen them though. I wasn't expecting much aside from fun, gory zombie action from a popcorn movie. I was wrong. This isn't a popcorn movie, and the film has so much more to offer. It's a touching father-daughter story, a critique of capitalist ideals in contemporary South Korea, and then on top of that, an entertaining zombie story as genre film flavouring. Train to Busan, the best zombie film. The third part of the night is... The third part of the night is a difficult film to talk about. It's a film reliant on its atmosphere to evoke the terrors of war, instead of offering a straightforward lens on the subject. It precedes him, but Zulawski's war horror film has notes of what would later become known as Lynchian. It's intentionally abrasive and confounding, as the film unravels into one of doppelgangers and wormholes. The third part of the night is legitimately one of the strongest, if not the strongest, wartime allegories, and it is crafted to perfection by a filmmaker who had experienced the occupation of Poland firsthand. It is the kind of sensationalism which cinema should be for, having a profound weight behind the bombast of the imagery, both visual and auditory. What's more, the film also features a compelling story about a man whose family has been murdered by the Nazis and is, then, plunged into the nightmarish existence which follows. The colours are washed out, reducing any semblance of life and making it all blur into the incomprehensible world of civilians who are marred by war. I gotta watch more Zulawski, because if this film proved anything to me as someone who is a little too green when it comes to Polish cinema, particularly older films, his filmography looks to be incredibly my type. David Cronenberg is one of those filmmakers who I can't help but adore. His films are just so out there conceptually, with practical effects to back them up, that there's no possibility that I wouldn't be a fan. Videodrome is one of his very best. I touched upon it briefly in my auteur theory video, but the film is the epitome of Cronenbergian. It's got the body horror, the allegorical reading about man's connection to the media, the sickly, diseased-looking practical effects which you simply cannot take your eyes off of. Or at least, I couldn't. I know he's a sleazy scumbag with a terrible reputation these days, but James Woods plays the sleazy scumbag type of character really well in Videodrome.
Do you know a show called Videodrome? It's just torture and murder. No plot, no characters, very, very realistic. I think it's what's next.
And it's the characters, let's not call it growth, progression. It's such a fascinating one to watch occur as the insanity swells around him and the conspiracy becomes unavoidable. Maybe you should have led with that. It's a David Cronenberg conspiracy movie with twists and turns and left field occurrences which, yeah, make the story feel that much weirder. Crucify me for this take if you want, but I think that La Piscine by Jacques Deray from 1969 is only pretty good. Put the pitchforks down, please. And if you weren't that concerned, cool? It's a film which I wouldn't say had to receive an English language remake. As I said, it's pretty good. But boy am I glad they did. The slight tweaks to the narrative that are made to the film increase the tension of the tense pressure cooker story that the original didn't quite fully capture. For one, the fact that Marianne, as she is called in both the original and the remake, has had a throat surgery which means she can't really talk, ramps up dramatic irony, which I would consider to be the not-so-secret ingredient in creating tension rather than cheap gimmicky jump scares. Marianne is one of my favourite Tilda Swinton performances now. May I add, it was her creative idea to have the character not speak so much, which is just, as I mentioned earlier, so well placed within the thriller genre. Ralph Fiennes brings a spark of sheer joyousness as Harry, Marianne's ex who interrupts the couple's vacation. Oh, did I forget to say, this is kind of a love rhombus film, featuring a married couple, plus Harry and Harry's adult daughter, made by Luca Guadagnino before challenges would set the internet ablaze with the backdrop of beautiful Italy. It's got Guadagnino's signature romantic camera, which does a miraculous job of shooting the human body, be it in swimming scenes, dance scenes, or more intimate ones, with such a brilliant shade of blue captured with the swimming pool at the centre of the story. I love Luca Guadagnino films. I have an affinity for well-crafted erotic thrillers, emphasis on well-crafted both technically and narratively, and I wasn't expecting so much from this when I watched it at first. I was simply catching up with Guadagnino's filmography after I watched Queer Opening Day and came across this film. It exceeded all expectations. I understand the irony of bestowing upon you, if you've made it this far thank you, with some pretty hefty expectations. I am a big fan of Spike Lee's 90s and early 2000s films. So, Summer of Sam, 25th Hour, Girl 6, Crooklyn, and Do the Right Thing. Where those films shine is in their balance of tone. They have the capacity for comedy, but the films are also darker, to an extent, with Do the Right Thing's explosive ending being maybe the distillation of his voice as a filmmaker. Bamboozled is his flat-out comedy, a satiric takedown of racist attitudes present in network TV. Lee, in that period of his career, had already proven many times over to be a great writer. Do the Right Thing in its entirety is one hell of an achievement. So Bamboozled, with the minstrel show put up by Damon Wayans' Pierre Delacroix, as a giant middle finger to the corporate world of broadcast television, and how it is widely accepted by the public, enjoyed greatly, is Lee's most entertaining film.
We're using black actors with blacker faces.
Don't you think that people are going to be offended by
Yes, that's good. I want them to be offended. I want to wake America up.
It allows him to make a movie where the humour, derived from character interactions with the wider world, takes centre stage over more serious-leaning drama, and not the other way around. Not to say there isn't drama, there really is, but it's the jokes that stick. They're poking fun at national institutions, has the Spike Lee witticisms, and carries the social commentary that one expects and remembers from his films. Pandemic film, round 2. For some reason I'm only really piecing together now on the surface level. I did love summer romance films set during pandemics. There's something about a pandemic which strips the narrative of its side characters, so all eyes are on the leads. Firstly, the whole is very slow cinema at times. It's a Tsai Ming-liang film, so that's to be expected. Especially given the pandemic setting where people are quarantined within their homes, the fact that each moment lingers the way they do is strangely prophetic of what would happen on a global scale around 20 years after the film's release. Boredom. True boredom. It's a theme which Tsai Ming-liang seems to be fascinated by, as the entries in his filmography that I've seen largely include moments where the characters are dissatisfied with the monotonies of their lives. But the whole isn't only a slow meditation on boredom in a pandemic, it's also a musical. One of Tsai Ming-liang's two, the other of which, The Wayward Cloud, was an unfortunate omission from this list. It is this formalist element, with songs that have been caught in my head since I watched the film in early January, that I absolutely, definitively am enamored by. There's something about movie musicals which can just be so romantic in a way that's difficult to evoke otherwise. And so, in contrast to the slower moments, these musical numbers imbue the film with a sense of joyous electricity, which adds to the viewing experience of the central romance. Yang Kwei-mei singing Calypso in an elevator in one single take is one of the most memorable musical scenes, in my opinion. Apocalypse Now is one of those films which really is as good as people have said it is for nearly half a century. Even I, with my general distaste for the war genre, found it to be a masterpiece. Rather than being a traditional shoot-'em-up, isn't war bad but look at the perverse image of guns going off kind of story which typically permeates the war film genre, the film focuses on the act of going insane, gradually, over time. Of course this was made by Francis Ford Coppola at the height of his imperial phase, and of course it was made in the 70s. There couldn't be a better pairing of auteur and time to make Apocalypse Now. You wouldn't be able to capture most of the iconic imagery now, whether it be for moral reasons, or the fact that studios won't dare spend $140 million USD on an art film with big imagery. It itself is morally complex, as it forces you down a proverbial rabbit hole into the atrocities of the Vietnam War. We got fades between shots, voiceover narration,
and he kept winning it his way.
Montagnard army of his.
And they called me in.
A man like a god.
lighting so very clearly inspired to an extent by the German Expressionists. It is meant to be a nightmare come to life, and it delivers. It's a story about losing one's mind, one's very own place in the world, and the exposure to life-threatening violence in its myriad of forms. And it wouldn't have worked without Martin Sheen as Willard. There is a wariness in Sheen's entire being here. The posturing and the eyes bring out the most. This guy has seen some shit, but he can't stop himself from having to go back for more. To answer a question I asked earlier, Magnolia is PTA's best ensemble picture. It is, decidedly, not as fun as Boogie Nights, but it's no less entertaining. It's a film where each character's story is so engrossing that the format of the film, wandering between their stories until they all coalesce by the end, fits it perfectly. The structure of the film is absolutely flawless. There's no moment where I got disappointed by the cut from one story to another, because they're all so fascinating to watch. I love how everything interweaves, all connected by that batshit crazy ending, which adds to the film instead of distracting, as detractors would have you believe. When it rains, it pours. And the radio, which proves itself to be a necessary functional device for the characterization of the vast majority of the sprawling ensemble of characters which Magnolia so deftly juggles. Tom Cruise has never been better, giving his all as a character with emotion and presence which I don't think he's done since. Fingers crossed for Digger. It's exhilarating, never dragging, as I just got so invested in each of the characters' arcs, their personal drama and how they fit into the wider world as demonstrated by the colossal runtime and large cast of key, named characters. Magnolia is the kind of film which many studios won't make now. It's a relatively down-to-earth 3-hour-long characters drama, as opposed to a character drama, where a young filmmaker with some of the best actors, Cruise, William H. Macy, John C. Reilly, Julianne Moore, Philip Seymour Hoffman, the list goes on, got to make the film he had envisioned. I don't care if people think it's overindulgent and that PTA said that he cut about 20 minutes from the film. I think it's pretty damn perfect. There was a brief period of time, about 2 weeks, around March this year, where I attempted to catch up on musicals I hadn't ever seen. One of them was Jacques Demy's Donkey Skin. If you know me in person, you know that I haven't really shut up about it since. Especially right now, Demy has a special place in my personal film canon. He is, quite handedly, my favourite filmmaker from the French New Wave, and the main reason for this is the fact that he made these lavish, well-composed musicals with memorable songs and emotional stories. Donkey Skin doesn't have a strong narrative. If you want to argue that, that's fine, but I have to disagree. But I don't think it needs to have a powerful story, especially with its absolute disregard for its narrative cohesion in favour of pursuing its wildly comedic tone to the final scenes. The film's a really difficult one to pitch to people. It's a French fairy tale inspired narrative with incest and a donkey who defecates jewellery and gold, enough to sustain a king's lavish lifestyle in his kingdom. The thing that really makes this pop as a film are the musical numbers and breathtaking special effects. There's one in particular featuring a dress which I shan't say out of fear of spoiling the film. They're whimsical and light, but crafted with such care for the form and the boundaries that cinema was still constrained, to an extent, by during the tail end of the 60s. It reunited Demy with Catherine Deneuve, who was remarkable as the titular Donkey Skin, as she was in all of the Demy musicals she had led. Her voice is enchanting. Wicked's been a big deal recently. If you want a really magical fantasy musical extravaganza, Donkey Skin is waiting. The other entry from the aforementioned 2-week musical March period is Takashi Miike's The Happiness of the Katakuri's, which is also a bit odd. Narratively, it is much simpler than Donkey Skin, rest assured, but stylistically, Katakuri's is substantially weirder. Where Donkey Skin is actual cinematic magic caught on celluloid, Miike's musical is more deranged in presentation, which is evidently a selling point for people like myself. It is a chaotic story with a stop-motion prologue title card sequence which, to be fair, has no impact on the actual story or the themes on a surface level. It's purely disconnected from all the stuff that happens in the actual story. The deaths which happen over the course of the film at the main hotel are goofy and wacky in their playful tone. It's also got juvenile humour, which should not work by any means, but kinda still does. It's violent in its way, but never loses sight of the comedic familial drama musical at the heart of it. Thus, in its own special way, it's a comfort film of mine. I could rewatch Katakuri's whenever, wherever. Underneath the surface of Miike's excess is a genuinely heart-moving family drama, which is heightened by said excess. The big musical numbers are scrappy and weird, poppy in a very Japanese way. I can say that. I am. Which doesn't let go of how sentimental the film really is at the end of the day. One thing I've realised about my viewing habits since I was a boy with the superhero filmography of one James Gunn is that I naturally gravitate towards films about family. That which is messy, but still family nonetheless. Katakuri's is the only major one I've seen which treads similar ground to those films while still being about bloodbound families with the dichotomies which enrich those other stories. Let's not psychoanalyze here, and move on a bit. I've watched it twice this year alone, and I could probably do so many more times in the future. The Player is a deeply cynical film, where essentially all other films and TV shows about Hollywood, especially those starring prominent actors, are about the glamour of making films, producing movie magic. The Player doesn't do any of that. I'll keep this one brief because there's a pivotal turn early in the film, the inciting incident, which I didn't expect, and certainly didn't see coming from knowing only the cast and the letterbox blurb, which significantly alters the trajectory of the rest of the film. What I will say, this is another killer performance from Tim Robbins, and maybe my favourite one? The studio executive character he plays, Griffin Mill, is so morally reprehensible in this film that it's mesmerising. Truly, the character is this monstrous figure who is impossible to look away from, be both within his attitudes to filmmaking and, more importantly within the narrative level, the inciting instant of the film. Robert Altman's satire of the American film industry is a well-aimed sniper round which has, sadly, had little impact on it as the situation has only gotten worse these past 30 years. Which I guess is the point of The Player. I'm sorry I've been so hush-hush about this entry, but truly, I didn't want to spoil anything because this film especially is one where the narrative takes a very significant turn, which would likely ruin the viewing experience if spoiled. Watch The Player. Soon. I'm a big David Cronenberg fan, as you may now know, and I don't think a film encapsulates what makes him special more than his remake of The Fly. I love Videodrome, hence its place on the list, but The Fly is different, even within his filmography, or, at the very least, his filmography that I have been able to watch so far. The reason? It's the one film of his where the wild hyperbole of his horror is anchored by humanist storytelling and characters with an added layer of empathizability. Ronnie is probably the Cronenberg protagonist who is the easiest to root for, which makes the tragedy at the centre of the film hit just that much more. Hollywood did Geena Davis dirty. She should still be around, and not just in bit parts in smaller films. In horror films like the ones Cronenberg makes, you need a straight man archetype to react to the horror, whereas the grotesque, no matter how visceral it looks to the audience, lacks stakes, like Max Wren from Videodrome. But Geena Davis is Ronnie, with her complicated feelings for Brundle, her need to survive, and the terror she has for her unborn child, anchors the film with the character drama which makes The Fly the masterpiece that it is. Then of course, there's Brundle, whose deterioration is the horror of the picture. Firstly, like in practically every other Cronenberg film, the prosthetic work is sickening. I love it. It's the theatrical element of the director's work which is the most characteristic of his recognisable style. But it wouldn't come together as fully without Jeff Goldblum, who's exceptional with both the pre-transformation Brundle and the post-transformation monsterized version of the character.
My ear. No. I'm scared.
A remake which is significantly better than the original to the extent that it has essentially eclipsed it from the public consciousness completely. The Fly is Cronenberg's masterpiece. Yeah. I had never seen There Will Be Blood until this year. What can I say? I really hadn't watched a lot of PTA before this year. The other PTA films missing from this very list are Hard 8 and Phantom Thread. That's about half of his filmography that I watched this year, and my god, There Will Be Blood is nothing less than his magnum opus. Call me basic. It's PTA continuing a trend after Punch Drunk Love. We would stray from the ensemble films of his 1990s era and, instead, hone in on one central relationship, that of Daniel Plainview and Eli Sunday. Daniel Day-Lewis gets his flowers enough, so let's continue to give him more. It is one of the best performances, ever. That rage, the drive for capitalist gain in the oil business, it's all in the eyes. You can't see through that face and see the actor beneath. It's all Daniel Plainview in those eyes. I'm as torn on the method as anybody else, but sometimes the results are worth it. Plainview is evil incarnate, but it's an understandable evil. Not sympathetic evil, but it's the kind that you can take note of in the real world. Yet, I would be deceitful if I didn't say that I think Eli Sunday is the most interesting character in the film. The protagonist-antagonist relationship is what makes them both magnetic torch on screen, but Paul Dano goes head to head against Daniel freaking Day-Lewis, doing exactly what a supporting actor should do. He doesn't outperform the lead. His performance makes Plainview shine that much more.
Armies of my boot will kick you in the teeth, and you will be cast up and thrown in the dirt and thrust back to perdition.
When Eli Sunday is preaching and his face is going all red, and when he's being pulled by the hair into oil by Plainview, the only thing that I could think was, oh shit, now that's great acting. Dano's a brilliant actor, no one's going to really disagree with that point, but Eli Sunday is one of those characters who needs to be memorialised on the same pedestal as Daniel Plainview. Plus, the brilliant set pieces combining character drama, camera movement, a Johnny Greenwood score for the ages, and action which was a glimpse into what he could do in that genre. There Will Be Blood is truly legendary, and one of the best films of the 21st century. I said that the list had no particular ordering, and that's not wrong. I'm not pulling the rug out and undermining my saying so. But The Confession was the film that I wanted to highlight at this number 1 spot. This is the one I went in with zero expectations. I was simply scrolling through films from 1970 on Letterboxd when I saw the poster, a 4-star Roger Ebert review, and the fact that the protagonist is played by Yves Montand. So I decided to watch it and, holy shit, The Confession is a masterpiece. It's a film about political turmoil and torture which is captured with rhythmic camera work and, more notably, the editing kept me hooked as actions, even those which seemed minute, were emphasised with cuts to extreme close-ups. It's a harrowing experience as you're placed within Yves Montand as Gerard's perspective, forced to walk continuously in cell as his captors torture him in order to get him to confess. Tension is a subtle art with potential for explosive results, metaphorically, and The Confession is this film which understands how to create the tension necessary to create a film which, by the end of it, becomes a courtroom drama. It has the writing to keep you hooked and second guessing, trying to piece together what could be happening in any given moment, and how that naturally builds to the next scene, and so on and so forth. Costa Gavras. I was not familiar with this guy's work, seeing a pattern in this list, but, again, I'm going to have to find more. Yves Montand brings the heat as the dramatic anchor of the film, whereas confusion at his situation, entrapped, is transposed upon the audience. Yeah, this is the big one that I feel like I need to talk about. It's more lesser known than Magnolia or There Will Be Blood, so I feel justified in my championing of it at this very climactic junction within the list. If there is but one film that you take away with a need to watch from this list, please watch the other ones too. That's the point of the entire video, but either way, watch this one. The Confession. What a picture. So that's the list. What were some that you all really liked? Do you have recommendations which might make it to next year's list? Comment them down below. If you want to hear more, like, subscribe and whatnot. Another list video releases tomorrow if you're watching this the same day I upload this, and I do film reviews, anywhere from 1 to 3 weekly. Well, that's all. Keep on watching movies, and form your own opinions. See you in the next one.